Bam. We're live. Good deal.
Deal.
All right, guys. So Chelsea is back, our local virologist friend of the neighborhood. No
Hi,
longer in the
everyone.
neighborhood. But yeah, so she was here probably about a month ago, maybe
I think so.
4 to 6 weeks, somewhere near, and we had some good interactions, and a lot has changed, or not a lot, but some things have changed that are
things have
significant.
changed.
I figured this would be a good time to double back and be like, hey man, I got more questions, So so I sent you some questions earlier that I got through Twitter and DMs and stuff. So I'm trying to think, what was my first? I sent them to you on the phone.
I think you asked about how the CDC.
Oh, yes. How does the CDC
new variants?
Yeah. So all of a sudden, here's Delta.
Yeah.
What's the process of the CDC saying, okay, there's this new thing? Like how they discover it, when they decide it's like a dominant strain, if you will, variant.
Yeah. So the CDC does this thing called genomic surveillance. And actually, the WHO, the World Health Organization, also does this. So I'm pretty sure the WHO had kind of identified the Delta variant circulating in Europe and India prior to even the CDC tracking it. So that helped. But then the CDC genomic surveillance, they essentially take samples from public health departments, public agencies all around the country and do full genomic sequencing on them. So they test the whole genomic sequence of the virus from your nasal swab or throat swab. And they don't do that for every test because that is almost impossible to do.
Yes.
But they do it in 3 different ways. So the CDC themselves do a set of tests. I think they've identified a few public health departments, potentially maybe depending on like hotspots or that kind of stuff. And they have the capacity to do, I wrote it down so I know, 750 samples a week.
Okay.
Which isn't very many. And they kind of identified they had a lack in capacity there. So they also partnered with like common diagnostic laboratories. So these are the places like there's one called Quest, but like where your test that you get done are normally going. So they've kind of partnered with them. And through this network across the country, these diagnostic laboratories, they can do full genomic sequencing on about 20,000 or more samples.
Oh.
And so it's a much bigger chunk of the population. And so through that, they can say, hey, in California, we're seeing 75% of the cases that come in as Delta, or we're seeing something else that hasn't been identified or something like that. And in addition to that, they've also done it where they've paired up with 29 universities to also do full genomic sequencing of different viruses coming in. So they kind of have like a threefold approach to kind of track which viruses or which variants are circulating in which regions.
And that's based upon like, I think I've read some reading on this. They based upon like just random samples being sent in, and per 100 it gives you a percentage, like a breakdown in trends and stuff.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. So they're kind of extrapolating that data, but it's because they're taking certain percentages of whatever population is. They're using that as kind of a sample size.
We have a fellow virologist in the crowd. This is awesome.
Oh, hey, how's it going?
Mr. Guyute? Guyute? I don't know. I hope I didn't butcher it.
I'm arguably terrible at pronunciation, so I'm not even going to attempt that.
Yeah. I'm half decent, but Guyute seems like it might be right. But depending on where the name originates from. But yeah, I just love these things that you really can't, like, I can Google some basics, but like I didn't know all that shit you just said. Like I saw there's sample sizes, there's random stuff, and they test them, and it says, okay, this week is this week is 10% in this district, and all of a sudden it's 40, then all of a sudden it's 80.
Yeah.
There's a problem here, and it's the Delta is right now is what's killing off our
and one of the other things they're
system
looking
right
at is there's a chance that our diagnostic tests that we are getting to tell us positive or negative, there's a chance those could start to be ineffective. And so they're also tracking for that. Like, are we seeing a variant that's moving away from something that's, do we need to tweak our diagnostic tech a little bit? So they're kind of checking for all of that to make sure.
Yeah, that's true too, because could have different markers. What is the test? So that's something else I got to ask just off the top of my head. How does the test determine positive, negative? Is it antibodies?
So you can kind of break down COVID test into 2 different categories. So one is called like a viral test. So you're testing for the presence of the virus. And one is an antibody test. So you're testing the presence of your body's antibodies to the virus. And so often we think of the viral test as like you actively or kind of actively have the virus. And the antibody test is like you had the virus and you have some sort of immune response to that.
Mm-hmm.
There are subcategories in each of those. So there are different types of antibody tests. There are different types of viral tests. But most often the viral tests we use are like, they're called nucleic acid amplification test. And so they have these little chunks of primers essentially that are looking for a specific part of the virus. And so and they run it through a machine called a polymerase chain reaction, or an instrument called a polymerase chain reaction, to kind of amplify that. And so they can see from a very small amount if it's there or not.
So that's how you do like the rapid test, then, probably to amplify it, the rapid test. Okay.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I'm no virologist from thinking. That makes no sense. Yeah. We have someone here. Her name's Jareen. She says, we are only at 30% vaccinated in Washington County, Oklahoma.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
School started last week.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
And I know for sure Oklahoma is against mask mandates. So that's a problem. And so the other question, that's right. So one of the other questions was, why is this variant more aggressive or transmissible with kids than it was before?
Yeah. So part of that is, I think there's a lot of factors coming into play. One of it is, it's actually, this variant appears to be more infectious across the board. So across all age groups. So it's not just specifically in kids. One of the things in virology that we look at as a measure of how infectious a virus is called an R0 value. And that measures, I think we talked about this last time, but for every one person that's infected, what's the average number of people they're going to spread it to? So I think the original strains of COVID were like, that R0 value was 2.6 to 2.8. And I think the Delta variant, their prediction is it's closer to like an R0 of 5 or 6.
So close to double.
Yeah, so close to double. And so when it's more infectious across the board, you're going to see more kids getting it, because it just increases how many people are going to get it in each age group.
Right. All age groups. Yeah.
Right. And then kids under 12 don't have the availability to get the vaccine.
Right.
So they're not as protected as other age groups. Right. Because through everything we've seen, is the vaccine is still very effective at preventing hospitalizations in the general population.
Yeah.
Regardless of, we're seeing breakthrough cases and you're maybe able to transmit it. There's some studies coming out on that. We're still seeing a very good reduction in hospitalizations of the vaccinated population.
The last I saw, it was 99.2% of hospitalizations are unvaccinated people. And the other 0.08% is, or the 0.8% is breakthrough cases, which is less than 1%.
Yeah. And I do think that it's starting to change a little bit, because one, our vaccination started in December, January. And so we're 8 months out. We don't really understand quite yet how long that antibody protection lasts, but like the seasonal flu vaccine protects you for 6 months. We're past that window. I think this one is going to protect you for a little bit longer, but like, at what point our antibody protection levels from the vaccine start dropping? That data is still coming out.
There's actually a pretty cool TikToker I follow that is actually a virologist that works in a lab.
Oh, hey.
And he actually got the vaccine, and he tested himself before, he tested himself after, and then he tested himself every week. And it shows the darker the blue color, the more antibodies are present. And he's testing them every week since. So guys, look, I'm still fully high load here. It's still 100%. It's blue. It's not even light blue. It's still there. It's been 8 months for him. He's one of the earlier ones too in the lab. So he's showing us that for him specifically, he's still showing a very high load after 8 months. So
hey, that's awesome. And I think there's a lot of people that have that. The other thing is, though, immune system is person specific. My immune system is different than yours, is different than his. And so like your age, your health conditions, pre-existing conditions, right? If you have cancer, if you're immunocompromised, they're all things that play into how long your immune system will protect you against this.
Yeah. So actually, that's a good sequitur here. A lady in Florida says, are boosters recommended for all adults?
So not yet. Part of the complication with that is right now, these vaccines are still just emergency use approvals. And so using them like off label is not something we can do. Right now, boosters are only recommended for immunocompromised people.
Right.
But I actually think if I had to guess, in the next 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to see boosters recommended for all adults.
Yeah. Because
I've been tracking that a little bit, and I think it's coming.
Yeah. Let me know when you hear anything on that, because I'm sure it'll be all over the goddamn news, but
yeah,
I figure that, you're on the ground in the lab. So like, is your lab still like working on the testing part? Is it more R&D type of stuff?
So I've actually transitioned out of SARS-CoV-2 research. I graduated and got another job. So my lab is still doing a little bit, like my graduate school lab is still doing a little bit with SARS-CoV-2 testing. I guess not testing, but research on SARS-CoV-2. Right. But I'm not involved with that.
Okay, gotcha. We got another question here, my boy Nell. Now, Nell, I'll give you guys full context here, is my good friend. He's a former, I'll say he's a recovered conservative. But he's been very hesitant because he had a very bad reaction. He got hospitalized from a vaccine. He has some respiratory issues years ago, and he's been very hesitant since. And he's finally had enough information. He's come around. Him and his wife and his daughter's getting it, but he has a child that's under 12. Yeah. So he's saying here, is schools opening up a good idea with under 12? So that's a good question.
So, I mean, I think it's a complicated question, right? Because we can absolutely say, like, until that population can get vaccinated, we should just keep it shut and keep them at home. But there are other, right, like childcare is an issue with that. Like, how do we navigate that? How do we navigate learning? Because we know students aren't learning as much when they're at home rather than in school. There's a social aspect to that. And so I think if you are sending your kid to school and they're under 12, my recommendation is I would advise they wear a mask regardless of the school's policy. And I think if they continue to mask, and hopefully the school also recommends masks, the mortality we're seeing in kids, even though the hospitalizations of kids are increasing because more of them are infected, which is as expected, the mortality rates, the amount of kids dying from this hasn't changed. Right.
It's very low for children.
It is not increased. It is very low. So their risk of dying is still very low.
Good. That's good, because I know because my kids are older. All my kids are vaccinated, but Nell's got a youngster that's 9 years old, man. So I understand the absolute hesitancy and all that,
And I'm also hopeful that I think. Oh yeah, that's perfect. I love this comment. But I also think that, kind of to go back to the vaccine for young kids, I think in the next couple of months we're going to see vaccination available to down to 6.
Yeah, I heard 6 to 12 is the next, and 2 to 6.
I think so.
Wow. So, Mr. Gayut, I'll say here that a primer is an PCR string DNA that can bind to known DNA like COVID. The PCR will then make full copies of COVID. Oh, okay. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, that's like kind of like the spike protein. How we test for viruses. I appreciate the clarification there. Thank you for tag teaming on that.
So that's how they that's how they also make the mRNA, right? For the spike proteins, you get the sequence that you want and it makes it in the body type of thing, right?
Or they inject it's a little RNA. Different, but kind of the same concept.
Yeah, okay. But this is saying that this thing will bind to it, and that's what tells you if it's positive?
So these primers are kind of small chunks of that, and they bind to the larger piece of DNA, and they're able to, through this method, kind of run through it and make that DNA and kind of circulate and amplify it to, when you have a little bit of it, you can make it appear like a lot of it, so you can visualize it.
Gotcha. Breathe the shit out of it.
Yeah. That was probably kind of a shitty explanation. I'm sorry. I appreciate the tap in.
Yeah, a whole bunch of them. Yeah, and I feel bad because you have people like I have a friend named he has a TikTok channel. I won't say his real name, so you don't want to put that out there. But his channel is called No Use for Names. He's a veteran like myself. He's gonna be running for school board because he got freaked out when the QAnon people were like, we're gonna run for school board. I'm like, we don't need the idiots in charge.
Yeah.
And so he's like, I'm running for school board. He's going to his first school board meeting tonight. And tonight's the night they announced that they're mandating masks and all the anti-maskers are coming. And they're making them sit in a sequestered area. Like, you unmasking people, you sit over there. Yeah. We're going to be over here, And so it'll be interesting to see what's happening to that, because I really, really hope all schools mask mandate children, students, and faculty and ancillary staff, everyone, because like you said, the ones that can't get vaccinated still need that mask as a protector.
Yeah.
Like,
And,
do you want
I
someone
think
sneezing on you? Put a mask on.
because we have some evidence now that even the vaccinated can transmit it. When you're vaccinated and have been exposed or around a large crowd and then are around a young kid, I would still vaccinate, right? Obviously, if you're within your house, that's maybe not reasonable. But if I was going to go visit a 4th grade class right now, I would probably mask up to protect them.
Oh, me and my girlfriend have never stopped masking, ever. We still go into stores, we wear masks, and we're pretty damn consistent about that. And I went to I actually made a video about this on my TikTok channel. I went to the local Hardings here in Coloma, Michigan. Went in there with my mask on. I was one of like 5 people in the whole damn store with the mask on. And this lady was like, give me the stink eye. Like, she's like,
I know.
Doing that Karen kind of bullshit, right?
It's tough because if you wear a mask, people assume you're unvaccinated.
Or that you're a crazy liberal.
Right. It's kind of the horseshoe effect of politics. The far right and the far left are maybe closer than the middle.
Right. And but she just kept doing that. And then she actually like followed me other in the store away from everyone else. And she's like, can I ask you something? I'm like, yeah. She's like, why are you wearing that mask? I'm like, why aren't you? Like that happened in real, like someone felt safe enough to come up to me and say, like confront me about wearing a mask. I'm like, really?
Yeah.
But like, these people are out there.
Maybe she genuinely wanted to like understand. Maybe she was vaccinated and she was like, oh, if he's wearing a mask. Okay.
No,
I'm trying to be hopeful.
Yeah, I know. I wanted to be a positive interaction. It just wasn't. She's like, let me guess. You're one of those crazy liberals that thinks this hoax is real. And you probably watch CNN every day on repeat. I'm like,
okay.
I was like, my body, my choice. If that speaks to your terms, maybe that helps.
Yeah.
But yeah, those people are out there and unfortunately running for school boards. And, so that I want more people like my friend, No Use for Names, to run for school board positions to keep our community safe. But first, you must get vaccinated to keep community safe and your family and your coworkers and your friends. That's a big one.
Yeah, it's important. It's right now. It's the best protection we have.
It's the only real option we have outside of masking and social distancing. That's it.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So here's a tough one from Bobby, my other conservative friend. I won't say he's a reformed one. He's still in that camp, but I'm okay with that. He says, what do you think of mandating vaccinations for all citizens with medical exemptions?
So that's a tough one. I think medical exemptions kind of fall into we could be anywhere category in this country.
For the provision of medical exemptions. That makes more sense. Okay, yeah. Gotcha.
The provision of medical exemptions.
Yeah.
Well, so I know it's a hairy situation because we don't want to get in a space where we start a civil war over trying to protect people. And so there are a lot of politics involved, I think.
Yes.
But the reality is, I think once we get this vaccine or these vaccines fully FDA approved, I think there are several instances, maybe not a global or universal national mask mandate, but there are several instances where vaccines have been mandated previously. We have history of this, right?
MMR.
If you go to a public university or you go to any university, you have to get the MMR vaccine.
Yep.
If you go to a public elementary school, you have to get the chickenpox vaccine now. Like it's been politicized, so it feels new, but this is not new. And I think we need to start talking about it based on history. Because one of the things I'm seeing is this is, for lack of a better term, this is the biggest vaccine study we've ever seen across this globe. We have so many people vaccinated that we have more safety data on this than we've ever had on a vaccine prior to going into the general population, which is incredible. And what we're seeing, it's so safe. It's so safe. There have been small complications, absolutely. But of the vaccine technologies we have out there, this is one of the safest we've ever seen.
There's more complications from aspirin than the vaccine.
I mean, there are complications from drinking alcohol, from smoking weed, from all of the things that we actively do in our lives. There are complications from driving a car, your risk of getting in a car accident, flying on a plane. Like there are risks. The way this is told to me, there are risks in everything we do in life. if you look at the risks and the benefits, you kind of do your own risk benefit analysis. I think that's important, and we have a incredible breadth of knowledge around the risk associated with this vaccine, and we've seen it's very minimal.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the thing too. So there's a difference between the government mandating and then there's private businesses mandating it. So I'm always going to be on the side of private business is the business's business. Like, right. That's, you have no shirt, no shoes, no vaccine. Like you can, they can do that. They can deny service for any reason that's not protected by the Constitution, which is race, creed, color, sexual orientation, whatnot. Right. But, like I'm 100% on the camp of public schools mandated, period. That's where I'm at. Mask mandates, vaccine mandates. If you don't want to get vaccinated or you can't get vaccinated, then there's public schools that have the online option. That's 100% there. There's options for you. And that's just, there's an option. Like, think about when young ladies got pregnant in high school 40 years ago, they sent them away.
Yeah.
And it's kind of how I think this is going to be treated, in a way where you're not going to be allowed to come to public schools without the MMR, without the chickenpox vaccine, and without the COVID vaccine. It's just obvious. Yeah.
I mean, there's a vaccine list that I have to get before working in any lab with like human pathogens. Like,
oh man, I can imagine.
Everything you do, you have in a public area, you have these vaccine strategies that we've had to deal with previously, and nobody's talking about it.
Well, Trumper here, my buddy Dennis, says, have you reviewed the studies on ivermectin? The peer-reviewed meta-analysis by the respected Tess Lowry. I have discussed this at length with a well-known biologist. I don't know what that means.
Yeah, so it's been a while since I've looked at the ivermectin studies. I looked at them a lot in kind of the SARS-CoV-2 COVID-19 early days, but I haven't reviewed any of them recently, so I don't know that I have enough information to give a take. I'm absolutely happy to do some research after this and send some information to Boyce that he can post.
What's that commonly used for beforehand?
It's like now I'm going to blank. Is it the anti-malarial maybe?
That might be it.
I'm going to Google
But that sounds cool with malaria. Oh, evolutionary, not a biologist. Okay. Evolutionary.
There we go. It's better.
Okay.
It's an anti-parasitic is what it is.
Oh, for God's sakes. Yeah, that don't make any sense.
Well, so
like
it might make sense. But
please explain it. It doesn't make any sense to me. Like,
yeah,
a parasite
I'm not
is
going to comment on it because I haven't looked at it in a long time.
Yeah. Oxford is starting to study a virus as a treatment option pursuant to a government. Yeah, I mean, but here's the thing: we know right now the vaccine works.
Yeah,
period.
And I
we know that
part of this is when COVID first emerged and became a pandemic, and we saw it spreading. Part of our frontline intervention was, what do we currently have that we can put into people, and that includes like repurposing FDA drugs. Because or whatever, regulatory institute exists in the country. Like, what do we have available today that we can help save lives with? And I think right now the best answer for that, for people who don't currently have COVID, is to get vaccinated. I do think in some instances where people aren't vaccinated or have breakthrough cases, there are other antivirals that we need to continue to build, because this COVID-19 is clearly not going to go away.
Well, it's kind of like when the bird flu came about, West Nile virus. That was with the mosquitoes, right? There was no known treatment. So I had one of the 6 patients in Southwest Michigan that got it. Was one of my patients with therapy, and they were giving her like 6 different combinations of antibiotics, because they would take her blood, infect lab rats, and then do experiments with different combinations.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where we're at to begin with, but now we have a known treatment. But yeah, Dennis says it makes
preventative.
Sense. No, I'm just saying on the superficial level, Dennis, when I hear anti-parasitic and then a virus, those are 2 completely different organisms, and it doesn't make it's not an easy jump for me to logically think, oh, that probably works. It doesn't, like, I don't understand at that level, but yeah, whatever. If it works, it works. I don't give a shit, But yeah. Wait, yeah. Talk of ivermectin as a possible treatment is banned by. Whoops. Maybe you just sort of like a lab leak theory. Well, again, that's politicized bullshit as far as I'm concerned. I don't give a shit. I don't think they should be censoring any speech personally. And what up, Sue from Lisbon, Portugal? Sue, yes. What was this? 2 university studies included the largest group of the vaccine hesitant are PhD holders. I don't think so, dude. I'd like to hear about that. That doesn't make any sense to me personally, but
yeah, I haven't seen that yet. I have a PhD in biochemistry and I studied viruses for all 6 years, and I got the vaccine in February.
yes, for sure.
And all of my colleagues got the vaccine in February.
And thanks, Nell, for bringing this up. Texas Governor Abbott, who's anti-mask, anti-virus or vaccine, is now tested positive. And guess what, guys? He's fucking vaccinated. He's telling everyone else don't get it, but he's got it. Same with, I think everyone in Congress had to have it. Because if not, you have to mask up in Congress, which is the kind of the same thing I can see public schools doing. Is like, if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask, which isn't safe, is as safe. But I've seen some schools doing that. If you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask and blah, blah, blah. But they're always going to be playing politics with that stuff, which is just unnecessary. It's not productive. Let's just do what the science says right now. But I'm trying to look back at some of the questions I got from Twitter. Oh, everybody's fear-mongering on corporate media is with Lambda. So what have you found out about Lambda? It's supposed to be more aggressive of some sort.
So there's a couple. So the studies that are out on Lambda, similar to a lot of SARS-CoV-2 studies, are not peer-reviewed yet. Right. So there are a couple that suggest that it's more contagious than previous variants of COVID. But actually, there was one that I saw that suggests it's about the same contagiousness, infectiousness as the Delta variant. And so while, again, we talk about the R0 values, the Delta variant is definitely higher than the original. I don't know that Lambda is like drastically higher than Delta. And the other thing I would like to iterate about that, from the virology perspective, when we look at historical mutations in viruses, often viruses mutate in a way that make them more transmissible, but less fatal, because it's not productive for a virus to kill its host. And so while in this instance, more transmissible is not excellent from a public health study, because our hospitals are filling back up and we're starting to have to cancel normal routine testing in hospitals. It's definitely not what we want. But it also might mean the virus is changing to a space where ideally it's going to be less fatal, since that's kind of the historical mutation route we've seen in viruses.
Well, and they said some of this stuff is suggesting, like you said, you guys say suggesting, resistant to vaccines. And so this is not CNN, guys. This is infectioncontroltoday.com. This is their jam, right? So they're saying that Lambda variant might be resistant to vaccines. So I don't know more. That's what kind of just keeps popping up about resistant to vaccines. But they said the same thing about Delta at first.
Right. And
very effective against Delta.
Pfizer and Moderna both have had studies now that show vaccines are slightly less effective against Delta variants, but still, again, super effective against hospitalization with even the Delta variant, as we're seeing across the country, right? If they weren't effective against Delta variant, we would see a significant increase in the vaccine population being hospitalized, and we're not seeing that. Most of our breakthrough cases are in people that are immune compromised or the elderly population, which is kind of what we expect, because my guess is they didn't have good immune responses to start with. Right, and I would anticipate Lambda being very similar. Yeah,
because there's the corporate media is loving this, because they're getting clicks.
Made a lot of money this year, if I had to guess.
From Trump, now their cash cow is the vaccines, the virus, and stuff. And I'm always skeptical of this fear mongering. One case in LA, they're like, holy shit, here's the Death Star, it's coming at us. They're pointing their laser at us, kind of deal. And I'm always very resistant to this knee jerk reaction to Lambda. and then you look up the R naught score and you're like, oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like Delta, so yeah, it's what the hell? Oh, the Lambda thing. Never mind. They're making a Revenge of the Nerds kind of. This is way before your time. Revenge of the Nerds is a movie, and the sorority was Lambda, Lambda, Lambda.
Nice.
But yeah, I'm very interested to see because what's happening in India is coming this way, which was Lambda, and so I'm actually going to be talking to a student at a university in Mumbai.
Okay.
Who is being currently quarantined again because they have another variant outbreak there, and they make 70% of the world's vaccines are made in India. So that's not cool.
Wow. Yeah, that's
rough. But my other question was, how do you think Dr. Fauci has handled this so far? Because I know it's a big one.
So I had my opinion, and then I was like, asked my husband, I'm like, am I biased in this? But he agreed with me. So I actually would give Dr. Fauci a solid A, maybe even an A plus, because one, he's not actively doing any of the science. He is tasked with communicating the science in whatever administration exists while he's there, in a way that's effective and graspable for the American public to get the best information they can. And I think while political agendas have tried to be pushed on him and he's been tried to force to say certain things, I think he stood true and has communicated what he's learned, what the studies have learned. He's done it, in my opinion, in an effective way, without any underlying political agenda, regardless of the presidency he's worked under.
Okay, Dennis says here, in Oregon, look at only the past 30 days, 19% breakthrough infections, 9% hospitalizations or breakthrough, similar numbers in Colorado. Cities not released data as of May. Well, then how'd you get the data? What's your source for this, Dennis? I just want to know if the CDC doesn't release it.
Well, and I also,
no.
The other thing I'd like to know about those breakthrough cases is, one, when are they vaccinated? And two, what's the age and health status of those people? Because our population is greater, right? There's more than 9% of our population is over the age of 70. And that could cover all of those hospitalizations. And that's absolutely what we've seen. I don't know. I haven't seen any of that data in terms of that.
And this country is morbidly obese on average.
Yeah,
that's a significant factor.
The cancer rates in this country are high. So you're like, people on chemo are immune compromised. People with certain types of cancer are inherently immune compromised. There are like
rheumatoid arthritis, immunosuppressors. Exactly. Yeah, I got some patients that are really, really bad RA, and they're on what do you call it? Immunosuppressant.
Yeah.
And on corticosteroids, which also suppresses your immune response. So they're the ones that I am.
Yeah.
I mean, we're always very careful, but
I do think as we get 8 to 10 months out from the general population being vaccinated, we're going to see more breakthrough cases because the general population's immunity is waning, if I had to guess.
Oh, he's saying, okay, never mind. But yeah, so like those are my main questions that you just can't up and Google some of these things, without really, and you put things in a nuanced way that helps me explain to other people in the future, hopefully, and especially my patients.
I try to be helpful. Hopefully, it's
I have so many patients that still refuse it, man. And I'm like, damn. I just tell them, listen, all I'm gonna say is, if you're my family, I'm demanding you get it. As your therapist, I'm begging you to get it, and that's all I can say. It's in your best interest.
And I think it's hard, right? The vaccination issue in this country has been politicized. I mean, the whole COVID-19 issue in this country has been politicized since day one. Since early 2020, this became a political issue, which is not the way, regardless of your beliefs, we should view public health issues.
No, it shouldn't have. There's no party affiliation with healthcare. And that's what's been perverse about this whole thing is you have doctors and nurses in, I think it's Tennessee, where they're being escorted by security and police because people are harassing them for doing their job. And I'm like, what the hell? And we have people walking off the jobs like, you know what? I'm done, and I don't blame them because people are being overworked. Nurses and doctors are crying at the end of their shifts and going home. And
I mean, anybody in the healthcare profession watched the hospitalizations in ICUs be at capacity a year ago, and now we're back in the same spot. It's got to be awful to be on those front lines.
So Dennis says Oregon and Colorado 50% vax rate at the time of data. Okay, yeah. Well, and I hope this keeps going up, but I think that our vaccination rates have kind of plateaued, and the people that are going to get it are going to get it, and the ones that aren't or can't, except for the kids.
Yeah,
the kids are the ones.
It's hard, right? Because ideally, we want if we can vaccinate enough of our population, we can stop some of these variants from occurring. But the more people they have to circulate in, the virus has to circulate in, the more we're going to see these variants.
Nell says breaking news: New Zealand went to lockdown after one.
I saw that just before this.
Oh, no shit. Well, that's proper leadership. And plus, they have a lot of things at their advantage. They're on an island.
Yeah.
And they don't have to worry about
population.
People. Yeah, small population. It's remote, and they can control all migration. Period. Yeah. They don't have a southern border and a northern border and the seaports like we do a trade. And Sue here in Portugal, she says the people want to get vaccinated, but you don't have enough vaccines. And that's what really pisses me off. Where we have people turning away vaccines. I think they showed like 30,000 vaccines went bad on the shelf because people didn't want to get them. And they're like, seriously. Like,
I know. I'm hopeful that U.S. sent some, and I'm hopeful they're going to send more to other countries that don't have that. Because I know that's tough, right? Being in other countries and not having access to vaccine. And here it's a political debate in the U.S., which is like awful, right? Yeah. So hopefully we'll start allowing vaccine accessibility. But I think it being so bad in European countries, in India, now getting bad again in the U.S., it halts some of that global aid we can provide.
Yeah. Well, and Trump has some critiques of Fauci. I do too, where he misled the public about the masks and all that stuff at the beginning, and I understand the skepticism on that too, where it's because of this and that,
And I in my opinion, the way the masks came out, right, is initially so part of the issue happening here during this pandemic is you're watching the scientific method happen. And as a general public who has fairly little training in science, it's hard to watch, right? Because in science, we fail all the time. If you could have a front seat to my PhD alone, my very small, tiny contribution to science, my PhD, I can't tell you how many experiments failed. But that's how science works.
We'll say most do.
Right. You generate a hypothesis, you test the hypothesis, you look at your test results, you analyze, and you reiterate what that hypothesis should be.
Yep, and make adjustments.
Part of what we thought initially was maybe we didn't need masks to protect people. The second iteration of that is we were not at a scale to protect our frontline workers, our hospitalized, our essential workers, our doctors, our nurses. We didn't have enough mass production in this country to protect them. And so we were asked as the general population to stay home and not wear a mask because we had the ability to not be around COVID patients. Like the frontline workers didn't have that, and we needed them for them. And now we have learned that absolutely masks are preventing the spread of COVID. We look at flu cases.
Right. They're all down. The flu cases in
this country were so down this year. And as we started opening back up, RSV went up, which is also a respiratory virus. It peaked in the summer this year. RSV cases in the South are up higher than it's a normal RSV season, but in the middle of the summer. That's not when we see RSV in this country.
Yeah.
So we've shown masks are effective at preventing this. And so I don't think, in my opinion, it's not fair to say Fauci lied to the public. I think he communicated the information that he said for what we needed and what we knew of the scientific at the way and at the time. And then he has communicated our scientific method through the process.
Yeah.
That's my opinion. As a scientist, that's my opinion.
And I can tell you guys, frontline worker point of view is we did not have enough materials. I was wearing a mask that was supposed to be used for 12 hours and thrown away. We were using it for 5 12-hour cycles,
Yeah.
and they had to put it in a yeah, what do you call it? Sanitation, whatever you call it. What do you call that little thing where they cook them to clean
Oh,
them?
like an autoclave?
Yeah. They like did the lights and the heat and all that shit.
Oh, like a
and,
UV sterilization almost.
yeah. So they had to do this whole thing where we had to send it in at the end of our shifts, and they'd mark it with a marker 1 on the outside of the mask. You could see, and on your 5th one, if they came in with a 5 on it, they threw it away and gave you a new one. Put a 1 on there, and like we had to reuse them 5 times as long as necessary because we lacked resources, significantly lacked resources, and the shields for the positive forced air helmets, and
Mm-hmm.
it was really scary because I had a beard, I shaved, and I said, okay, that's better. Like I feel a little safer, and it's one of those things where it's pretty scary, and you have places that right now don't have enough beds. Like there's 0 beds available in Oklahoma. In some places in Texas, they're saying you have to wait for a child to die.
I saw that.
before
I
you
think
can get in.
Vanderbilt has stopped elective surgeries in their hospitals because they're getting close to capacity.
And I think my employer will be doing that very soon.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately. Let me see. Whoops. Oh yeah. People. Hey, Asia gets it. That's the front line of stuff because they're wet markets and stuff like that. They're different.
Yeah, and I think like
Mhm.
moving forward, I would not be surprised if during the seasonal flu, right, in the United States, we're a country where if you have a cold, you go to work. If you have a small fever, you go to work. If you have a GI issue, you go to work. I hope that will change. One, because we can work from home much easier in most fields.
Yeah.
And 2, I think we've seen that like if you do have to go to work or do have to go to public instances, hopefully we understand that if you wear a mask, you're going to protect those around you.
Right.
Because I do think Asian cultures have gotten that a lot more.
I'll tell you what, if I go on a plane, bus, subway, I'm wearing a damn mask. I don't give a shit what time of day it is, what month of the year it is, how I'm feeling. Fuck that.
Yeah. I mean, so January
me.
2020, I went to New York with some of my girlfriends, was watching the pandemic happen, right? Or kind of, I guess it was not a pandemic then. But we were on the New York City subway and I wasn't masking. I definitely wasn't social distancing from people. And now looking back, I'm like, I don't think I'd do that again without a mask on.
Yeah, that's close. You just don't know because at that time in January, it was only in like 7 cities. I think it was at that time in January. It's like 100 cases, and they had that cruise liner off San Francisco.
It was mostly circulating like Wuhan, and I was like, it hasn't really spread here yet. And the original SARS died out so quickly that we kind of anticipated it be like that. But obviously, 18 months later, that definitely didn't happen.
It was not SARS-1, that's for sure.
It was not.
Yeah, and I was actually in New York City. Me and my girlfriend in New York City. When was that? May? June. We went to New York in June?
Yes.
Yeah. We was in New York City in June.
Of 2020?
2021, this past year for an election.
Okay.
And so we're both vaccinated and stuff, but we still wore our masks, all public transit, and they still still required on the public transits. It's still required in Ubers, restaurants. Yeah, they still required them to come into most restaurants, but once you sat down, you unmasked and ate your food. But yeah, like we were still hyper vigilant because I'm like, we're in fucking New York, man. There's a lot of folks here.
Yeah.
And I was very nervous about going there. And now I'm going to be going to Nashville next month for a basic income march. And Tennessee is kind of fucking backwards on this stuff right now. But it's an outdoor event. I'm still going to bring a mask. I'm still going to probably wear fucking gloves, man. And who knows what else I'll put on my head. But it depends on how we're going. Another month from now, who the hell knows? It could all be shut down and canceled by then. Who knows?
Right. Yeah.
Because it really is. It's a vertical line in Florida. I mean, it is significant.
Yeah.
Higher infection rates than the beginning of last year. Like it is.
Yeah.
Delta really put it on people down there, man. It's sad.
Yeah. And I think if we could get to a point where even if we had that many infections, if we weren't filling up hospitals and people could still get adequate care, it'd be one thing, right?
Yeah.
But because we're hospitals at capacity, it's just we can't. If people are dying because they can't get care, rather than if we could have saved them if they had proper care, like that's kind of where we're at for juggling that.
Well, and that's the thing where, all the NICUs for the kids and the ICUs are at 80-90% capacity, and again, oxygen supplies, all that kind of stuff. Because when Delta first popped up in India, I talked to the guy over. That's when I first interviewed the guy that's a student in Mumbai at university. They were having a black fungal drainage out of their nasal passages because in India they ran out of oxygen supplies to give you steroids, which is suppressing your immune system, and they had fungal infections in their nasal cavities, throat, and people were going blind from a fungal infection in India before they really got it under control, and they went on lockdown for 4 weeks again, and so I'm interested to see what he says now, what's going on over there now. 2 months later, when Delta first hit there, like 8 weeks later, and I just trying to look at, I think it's 9 weeks now. And then we have that's also going to talk about. I've seen some variant projection modeling that's shown at current rates, like all the way out to Zeta. It's showing that we could be, if we don't flatten this thing out, the projective modeling doesn't look good either as far as variants go, because the more variants, the higher risk of having a significant mutation that's more fatal or more aggressive or whatever,
Yeah. So again, with that, the thing that's not captured in, I think, some of that predictive modeling is if we look at historical viral mutation, we absolutely can look at worst case scenario with predictive modeling.
Mm-hmm.
But historically, when viruses mutate, they kind of mutate in a way that makes them more transmissible, which also lowers fatality.
Right, because they want to live longer.
Right.
Yeah, a host.
Live with the virus, not quite alive, but they want a host.
Right.
If they're killing their host, they can't propagate and pass. And so I think those worst case scenarios, I'm hopeful as somebody who studied virology that's not going to happen. Right. We're seeing a point now where we're more transmissible in the same fatality. So we're kind of trending in the way we've seen historically.
Right.
Absolutely. We could be wrong. Something could happen to put pressure on it, to shift it in a way that we're not used to.
Yeah.
But we've never seen that before. So we have to go with the information we have.
Right. Well, actually, Bobby here brings up a very good point. Many people died in India, but infections are at a 5-month low because their surge is over, despite the fact that India is only 8% fully vaccinated. So what did they do right, guys? They locked the fuck down. They shut it down proper. They said, everybody get your asses home, sit tight for 3 weeks, and that shit curved significantly in the right direction. 8% vaccinated. And they managed to flatten that curve with one simple policy. Mask up, stay the hell home. That's the easiest way. You don't even need, that's something you can control.
Mm-hmm.
We can all choose to control this thing, but we just don't have enough numbers on our side of people that are just going to follow the science. I won't say rational or logical, just follow the science, So social distancing and masking, vaccinated or not, that's why I think that masking and social distancing is a mandate policy that protects us against stupidity. People that are absolutely not ever going to change their mind on it. I'm not saying people are skeptical. And plus, I think it's going to help is when we get this FDA approval, they're saying October-ish is what they're guessing, October, November for Pfizer.
Mm-hmm.
Then that can kind of get rid of that excuse. And hopefully people that are sitting on the fence can kind of come on along, But I think that's why we should be absolutely mandating masks and social distancing still indoors.
Yeah, it's been complicated because I think there's been some regulations that have come out from the CDC that are more trying to incentivize vaccination. So for example, when the CDC made their recommendation that vaccinated people could stop masking in outdoor spaces and then in public spaces, I actually disagree with the way they did that. I think there wasn't enough data. If I had to guess, I think why they did that is to incentivize vaccination. which I don't think from a science perspective is a fair way to put that statement out there.
Right. I
Because I
agree
think
with
what
that.
happened is everybody heard, I don't have to mask anymore, regardless of vaccination status. I don't think the amount of people that incentivized to get the vaccine jumped drastically after that.
No.
Um,
They gave away
but
$1 million prizes for crying out loud.
right.
But it
And
did
so
help in some places. Like Ohio did 5 $1 million
they
lotteries.
did. Yep.
And they did some high school kids that were over the age of 12, or it was 16 at that point.
16,
it was only 16.
They have college scholarships too.
College, hey, and incentivized some people, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's the juice is worth the squeeze, and it's not really.
Yeah, and I actually agree with the state incentivizations more than the CDC, because a lot of people look at the CDC recommendations as gold, kind of, in like, you know, an end all be all, and they're not. The reasons behind some of the CDC mandates or whatever haven't been science based; they've been politically based, and from a public health perspective, I disagree.
Yep.
Regardless of how what side it goes for, I just don't think it was well done.
Right. Well, Sue here in Portugal says that in Lisbon, you can't dine inside restaurants without a universal digital vaccine card. Her CDC vaccine card doesn't apply. Does Chelsea think USA should participate in that, a digital vaccine card?
I mean, if it were me and I had
the magic
whatever
wand?
universal say exists or national say exists, I'd be tempted to do it. But I think that potentially the violence that might ensue to restaurant workers checking for that vaccine or people that are just trying to do their job, I don't think it's fair to put that political issue pressure on them. Like, I just don't think restaurant workers are paid enough to, like, if they want to wear masks and protect themselves, but I don't think we pay them enough in this country to, like, be a security guard for a political divide.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point.
Like, I hate to say that that's what would be my limiting factor, but, like, I live here. I've lived here my entire life. I've seen it. I don't think that's fair to them.
And most of us have all worked in the food industry at one point in time at entry levels. And that would suck. Getting paid $2.50 an hour plus tips doesn't seem like it's enough.
No, not at all.
And my daughter is a hostess at a local restaurant too, and she says people complain about little things. It'll just get worse. But man,
sorry, my computer I thought was charging, and I just got the low battery notification, so I apologize for the size.
No worries. Where'd it go? Yeah, exactly, Bobby. All of these things work. All of them work. They all help. It's not one, it's all of them work. And in conjunction with it significantly helps with each step you take. It's just obvious, right? Just washing hands, guys.
Right? We all learned how to do it in early 2020, like mid 2020. We learned how to wash our hands, right? We had like government ads and commercials on how to wash our hands.
Yeah, which is sad, but it's there for a reason.
But it's needed, right? Now we know.
Yeah.
Now we know a way where we can effectively wash our hands
and dry them off,
and effectively wear masks in a way to protect us.
Yes. But yeah, I think those are the most common questions. We've all kind of addressed them, and I think that we've kind of. Is there anything else you want to put out there that you've seen that you want to make sure people know?
I think we've kind of hit most of what I've seen. I mean, I think getting good non-news source of information is important. I think the CDC has actually had quite a bit of good information out there as we continue to grow and learn. Like, they have a whole page dedicated to how they're tracking the variants, which variants are there. They link to the global variant surveillance network. And so I think that's been a pretty reliable source of information. And the CDC, while I think they've done a fairly shitty job in controlling this virus and in all other aspects of this, they have good information available.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I've also appreciated Johns Hopkins University.
They have a beautiful COVID tracking website. It's been wonderful since like early 2020.
from the very beginning, man. They have been my favorite go-to place for mapping. If I'm doing like a
Mhm.
COVID thumbnail, I'll look at a region like, okay, if there's an article about a surgeon in Tennessee, I go look up Tennessee, I look at their map, I just do a screenshot. This is what's happening in Tennessee. Like,
Yeah.
it's so thorough, and I love that they're the John Hopkins University. And plus, also, if you want to watch like a knee replacement, that's the place to go. If you want to watch neurosurgery, that's the place to go. Open hearts, they show it all, man. I love
Yeah.
John Hopkins University's website. It is a swath of information and access to stuff you normally will never have an opportunity to see unless you're in the medical field, going to college there, and you get to go to their observatory surgical observation thing they used to, and now
Hmm.
they just do it inside the room with video.
Yeah.
They're the ones that started that whole over the head thing, and that it's teaching hospitals like this is
Uh-huh.
how you cut the heart out and not kill them. Like
Yeah.
the first bypass I think was done there, or was it? I'm thinking of Bethesda. How do you say that?
Bethesda?
Bethesda. There you go in Maryland, right? That's where all the politicians go.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
yeah, share the link. It's just John Hopkins University. I'll put that in here. Yeah, John Hopkins University. Hopefully Chelsea's camera's not dying. But yeah, she stuck around for an hour, guys. That's awesome. If you guys have any other questions, definitely throw it in here. Yeah, guys, if you want to watch a hip replacement, knee replacement, plastic surgery, they're all on their website. It is phenomenal. I'm hoping her computer to just die. Your computer, so it's got to be your camera. She probably turned it off for a reason. But yeah, guys, so I'm going to try and chop this up into individual questions and make little clips. And then we can all kind of just save them on our phones and say, hey, if somebody has a question, here's a link. Bam. Here's a virologist's Q&A session. Oops, yep. Her computer died. I'll text her. Yep, she said her computer died. Sorry. Yeah, and I like that. Yeah, thanks, Sue. I know it's 1 a.m. over there in Lisbon. I appreciate you joining us. And Nell, thanks for the compliments on my new background, man. It was fun to make this type of stuff. Is fun to me. But yeah, so next I'm gonna reach out to the young man. His name is Prab. He is in India at university in Mumbai, and I'm gonna double back with him hopefully next week. And then we'll get some more information from what's going on in India. Maybe next Tuesday or Wednesday. And then what is it? Tomorrow night I'm going to be live streaming with Amber from the Michigan Veterans Association, the VA, about doing some kind of a fundraiser for a monument, a veterans monument has been destroyed by climate change, honestly, where they had record flooding in Midland, Michigan, and the whole thing just sank and broke over. They're trying to revamp the entire park. It's about $100,000 goal they have. I'm just trying to do my part and help. Yeah, hopefully next week I can get next Monday. Richard Ojeda is coming back. We're going to talk to him about Afghanistan. And I think it's important to get people on here that were on the ground. I've never been to Afghanistan, have no desire. But I want to talk to people that were on the ground there. I have someone in my girlfriend's family actually is a contractor over there, and he's in Iraq right now working as a contractor. He's an army guy that served in Afghanistan and had translators and worked with kids and schools and hospitals and shit. So he has some very personal experience with this too. So I'm gonna try and get a hold of him and Richard Ojeda and some other people that served there. And next Monday's panel is going to be on that. And then hopefully Tuesday or Wednesday we're going to do the one with the guy from Mumbai, Prab. But yeah, and then Thursday, of course, is the TikTok guys, Matt with Mute the Media and Shy with crowdsourced UBI, crowdfunding UBI. Yeah. So guys, thanks for joining us, man. It's been a beautiful hour. And I'll bring Chelsea back around maybe a little later once we get some different stuff we need to catch up on. But yes. if you guys have any other questions for the future, just let me know and I'll bring her back on. We can discuss it, or she can make a tweet and I'll share it or whatever. Or I'll make a separate video without her if she's not available. But yeah, guys, I appreciate you, man. And make sure you check us out. We'll be back again. Like I said, tomorrow on Wednesday and Thursday, we'll be back on the Trickle Up, not the Mindful Skeptics podcast, but the Trickle Up. Tomorrow's my podcast, but Thursday's the Trickle Up, of course. So, all right, guys, I appreciate you, man. I'm gonna go kick rocks and blow bubbles.